dominate ranked 1v1 games on Colonist. If this image makes you sweat with anxiety, then you've probably played a lot of Catan, perhaps too much. Now, most people know this as a 4-player game, maybe 3 if your friend fails to show up at the last second. However, there's a mode that offers a completely different, fresh experience that can be extremely fun. I'm talking, of course, about 1v1. My name is Sergio and I've been ranked as high as number 50 on Colonist global rankings for the base game, but I've recently really enjoyed playing 1v1. It's fun, dynamic, fast-paced, and games usually take much longer than the base game. So in this video, I'm going to use data as well as insights from top players to reveal everything you need to know about competitive 1v1 play on Colonist. It would be impossible to cover it all, so I'd love to hear about your favorite 1v1 strats in the comments. Ranked 1v1 has slightly different rules than the base game on Colonist, so let's get into those first. Instead of 10 points to win, it's 15. Friendly robber is on, which means you can't place the robber and steal from your opponent until they've openly reached 3 points. You can hold up to 9 cards without having to discard if a 7 rolls instead of just 7. Dice are balanced instead of random, and this means that rolls will better represent expected outcomes. There's a video coming on that soon where you can find an article about it in the description. Speed is set to very fast, which means turns last a maximum of 1 minute. And as you might have guessed, there's only you and your opponent. While the points to win are higher, you still only have 5 settlements and 4 cities, just like the base game. This means that even if you build everything there is to build, you'll still need either army, road, or multiple victory points to win. Now that we have the basics down, let's get into some juicy strategy talk. Let's start with perhaps the biggest thing. Number 1, placing settlements. When we're picking our settlements in the base game, production is usually king. This is because trading is a big thing, so if we have a lot of materials, we have a lot of leverage. In 1v1, you're self-sufficient, which means that you need to start considering other things besides production, and here are some of them. In a 4-player game, disrupting your opponent's game is nice, but it's really more of a side quest. 1v1 is much more zero-sum. So you want to keep in mind what resources are rare, because again, you're self-sufficient, so if you're producing all of one resource, that means your opponent isn't getting any. That will allow you to get ahead on things like army or road, depending on the resource. Besides looking for the scarce resources, you want to try and have a balanced game, producing all 5 resources if possible. If you're not able to do that, you should really be planning on your 3rd settlement to be on a hex that gives you that last resource, or a very strong port at the very least. Also, and I hope this doesn't trigger you, in 1v1 you are going to get blocked every time your opponent rolls a 7. This means that having flexibility with development cards can play a huge role. Also, you can actually win without having brick or wood in 1v1, but not the other way around. For those 2 reasons, I recommend leaning slightly towards an all-wheat sheep game in 1v1. One last thing about placements. You might have learned the hard way to point your roads towards less competitive areas in 4-player games. But naturally, in 1v1 games, there's much more space on the board, so you can be more aggressive with your road placements. The next helpful tip to win 1v1 games is liking this video and subscribing. We have a lot of good content coming your way soon, so we hope to see you there. For real now though. Number 2, your 3rd point. As you probably know, in the base game, we want to get points as soon as possible. Whether it be in the form of settlement or city, we want to increase our production quickly to get the ball rolling. In ranked 1v1, however, we want to save for a big first turn. And this is of course because of the friendly robber. Remember, in this mode, our opponents can't steal from us until we're openly at 3 points, and we can store cards safely until 9 cards without having to discard. That means that we can save up for a strong turn. So we don't necessarily want to make a settlement quickly if it's not going to be a huge help, because that might mean that you're going to get blocked, lose resources, and maybe production of a key resource. Instead, in 1v1, we often want to wait for a stronger first move. Something like a settlement and a city is ideal, but you might want to do something like 2 roads and a settlement to plow your opponent and trump their momentum. And that takes me to the next crucial point. Number 3, momentum. Momentum is everything in 1v1 games, and it's something that you feel quite evidently. It's thrilling when it takes off for you, but it's absolutely infuriating when you see your opponent's momentum skyrocket. So here are some principles to keep in mind for momentum. Once again, momentum is much more zero-sum than in 4-player games. If you have momentum, you can block your opponent, you can plow settlement spots, and you can trump their momentum as a whole. And there's 3 main ways to mess with your opponent's momentum: blocking, monopoling, and plowing. Blocking is clear. If your opponent rolls a 7, that bad boy is being placed on you, so you want flexibility, and you get that with def cards. Now, what to block is pretty important. As we said, you have to be self-sufficient. So if they only have 1 hex for a specific material, that might be a really good choice to block. Wheat, for instance, is used for almost everything, so if they only have one wheat hex, that's a pretty solid choice to trump their momentum. If wheat is covered, ore is usually a pretty good choice, but you'll adapt obviously depending on ports. In 1v1 games, it's also easier to track cards, so you can know what your opponent has and needs, and your block can be according to that. Say your opponent needs 1 sheep for settlement and they only have 1 sheep hex. You could block that. Similar principles to what we've discussed apply to monopolies. In 1v1, they can be used as a tool to unsettle your opponent's game. If they have a brick port and a bunch of brick, you might want to monopoly even though it doesn't conspicuously help your game. It's really the same rule. Hurting their momentum helps yours. And finally, a personal favorite, plowing. Plowing is a huge way to influence momentum. In fact, it's so big that I urge you to look for placements where you can plow your opponent using your free road or even with your settlement. And this isn't just because it will improve your game and trump their momentum, but it might even make them resign. Resigning is actually quite common in 1v1 games, with about a third of the games finishing this way, and it often comes after a plow like this. Essentially, you want to keep in mind situations where a plow might not give your game the greatest improvement, but combined with the damage that it does to your opponent, it becomes worth it. Alright, we covered a lot, so here are the main takeaways to keep in mind. For your initial placements, try to get scarce resources while getting a balanced setup. When in doubt, lean towards an all-wheat sheep game. Take advantage of the rules and save up for a big first turn. And finally, don't tunnel vision and focus just on your game. Hurting your opponent's game and momentum in 1v1 is as important as improving yours. That's all I have for today. Consider liking, subscribing, and having a chat with me in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.